and welcome to the Privacy Podcast. I am Tom Woods, and joining me today is Sam Castic. Sam is the partner at Hintze Law, or co-partner at Hintze Law, I should probably say. Previously, CPO for Blackhawk Network and senior at Nordstrom, amongst others. Sam, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Tom.
No, you are very welcome. You're very welcome. Look, wanted to start the conversation talking about CPOs as a title, but also as influence. So, around how the role of the CPO is increasingly critical. Obviously, we've got AI governance on the plate as well. What have you seen at clients that you work with and at organizations you've worked with that makes the CPO a vital member of the C-suite and influential at that board level?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the CPO has the potential to be well positioned to really see what's happening across the entire enterprise and then act as a strategic advisor to help the organization achieve its objectives. So I think the opportunity for the CPO is to understand the corporate objectives, strategies, and tactics, and then to position themselves as an enabler for that. And that might require them to understand where there's interplay with privacy objectives, really define in those moments what the priorities should be or are, and then to help drive those objectives or strategies forward to be that enabler. So this is a particular mindset that's required for the CPO that isn't really overly legal or compliance centric.
Is that perhaps the mistake that is made sometimes in terms of being maybe a bit too, it is a compliance role, but perhaps too compliance centric rather than business focused? Would that broadly be fair?
I think so. I think that if you set yourself up to be a real compliance centric mindset or a compliance centric role, you're less likely to be, tapped to advise on the more strategic initiatives or to be viewed as more of a strategic partner.
No, for sure, and I would echo that. Certainly, saying no is can be important but risky depending on what it is. Which kind of leads to the next point to cover, which is balancing privacy and innovation, in particular with those business initiatives that may be more risky in terms of how they look. How does one, as a CPO, balance that risk between achieving the business objectives, maintaining compliance and customer integrity?
Yeah, it's a partnership, I think, between both privacy and other stakeholders at the business. And I think as organizational strategies are being set and approaches are being selected, privacy, of course, needs to be considered at that stage. And a good way that I've seen this done is to make sure that privacy objectives are defined and bought into by stakeholders, so defined in a really comprehensible way. And then, making sure that the stakeholders understand how the privacy considerations show up when they're setting their objectives and their tactics. So that could come through easily understood privacy values that align to the organizational values and objectives, privacy teams that show up with an enablement mindset, and of course, an organizational culture that supports this kind of collaboration. So I see that, and I've seen that regularly, enable innovation in a way that centers appropriately on privacy values. And I think that's a good way to think of it. In contrast, if the organizational stakeholders aren't really understanding why privacy matters or what the privacy objectives are, if the teams are coming in with a really compliance-centric mindset and not an enablement mindset, and then privacy teams are separate or siloed and the culture doesn't really support that collaboration across teams, it's going to be a lot tougher for a privacy leader or for an organization to address privacy as they're innovating.
And you tend to find that you'll end up getting involved at the last minute in certain projects and programs because no one wants to tell you at the start because they're worried that you'll be told, well, you can't do it.
Exactly.
And and that's the big blocker. You want to be involved as early as possible in order to ensure the best possible compliance within delivery and from a commercial mindset. And I think that's the key, is getting people to come to you rather than have to go to you. Drives better outcomes from what I have seen.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's, the partnership that needs to develop for it to be successful. Because otherwise, if checking with privacy is always a compliance thing, on your checklist that you have to do before you go live, everything's going to be baked, everything's going to be decided. And then the privacy team isn't really well positioned to influence the design in a way. And so they have to make the choice of, do we say no, which you don't want to say, or do we say, here's some window dressing you can do around the edges that might minimally address privacy requirements, but it doesn't really create a privacy centric culture or ensure that those values are going to be realized.
No, and it doesn't demonstrate that value, just like you said, and that's really
Precisely.
what you want to be doing. Talking about demonstrating value and being involved in projects from early on, the emerging technology of the day is AI, and AI governance in particular. How are you seeing AI governance come into privacy teams with clients that you work with? How are CPOs dealing with it? And what skills perhaps should be being developed by CPOs and privacy teams that are maybe not there at the moment or not being considered?
Yeah, I think you're right to point on this because I think that I'm seeing a lot of clients and peers at other organizations that, of course, are seeing their organizations build and buy AI solutions that are helping them streamline how they operate and to innovate how they operate. And as privacy teams are used to managing personal data risks and privacy risks enterprise wide, they often have a unique skill set that can be called upon in helping the organization to define, to scale, or to right size its approach to AI governance. So there are important lessons that privacy professionals can bring. And what we're seeing with clients is kind of two things. Some clients are calling upon their privacy leaders to actually lead these initiatives and to own AI governance and to help set it up or to help scale it or right size it. And others are calling upon the privacy functions to be key partners in setting up and managing and running those AI governance programs. So we're seeing both approaches, but in either approach, the privacy team members really do need to have an understanding of how the AI solutions work, how AI technology and AI solutions work generally. And that requires, both upskilling and skill development through formal training or curricula or certifications like the AIGP that the IAPP has now, and through understanding within the organization where do they see AI solutions driving efficiency, driving innovation, and what's the roadmap for the future. So they need to understand both externally and internally how it can be leveraged to be those effective owners of the AI governance program or contributors to the success of the AI governance program.
No, absolutely, and I'm glad you pointed out that kind of no matter whether you have ownership of it and you are running it, or it's been given to you as to run, or not, you are still and should be quite central to it and heavily involved. And so, it's talking to some of the CPOs who maybe have not been given AI governance to deal with. Maybe it's been set up as a separate framework. They're still leading on it in other ways, and that's important. I think one of the interesting things I've seen and questions getting asked is outside of obviously the IAPP's IA governance certification now. What are the other ways that you're seeing privacy professionals upskill, or what resources are they using maybe?
Yeah, I'm seeing colleagues and peers and clients take classes. There's a lot of free classes that have been made available online, like through deeplearning.ai or through other colleges or universities that have made some foundational classes on how does AI work and what are some of the AI risks that need to be considered. Those are freely available or available at low cost. And I know a lot of folks who have been availing themselves to those resources. Of course, keeping up with some of the key developments in the AI space, whether that's reading, the laws that come out or reading the frameworks like from NIST on responsible AI governance. So being familiar with those types of frameworks, that's another way to develop some baseline knowledge. And then just seeking out other training resources to the extent they're available with industry groups or with organizational partners that you currently work with. There's often more bite-sized trainings to do or bite-sized webinars to do that can give you some basic knowledge. So I'm seeing people use all of those resources.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's important, I think, to emphasize that there are lots of different ways to go about doing that, and lots of different information that you get from lots of different ones. Again, it's such an emerging space. Kind of shifting gear a little bit towards privacy teams, right? We're talking there about different ways of upskilling and different ways of finding that. Looking at especially clients maybe where you're going in and they need to hire a new DPO or CPO or new team members. How have you seen that develop over the last couple of years? I'm referring mostly to remote working, of course, and challenges that poses privacy teams in their jobs as well, but also from a diversity perspective as well. How have you seen privacy teams, I guess, succeed in that or not?
Yeah, and I think we've seen some change as I know you're very dialed into since COVID started, and now here we are years later adjusting to hybrid or remote work, and companies perhaps changing how they view those issues as the companies evolve. But when you're dealing with a privacy function, when you're working with a privacy team that is a remote first team, I think there's a lot of opportunity there for creating a more diverse team than you may have been able to create if you were limiting your hiring to one particular geographic region or a small set of geographic regions where people have the ability to be coming into an office however many days a week, if we think of the pre-COVID times. So I think it opens you up to a lot more in your talent pool, and you can find more diverse candidates that have different perspectives and different backgrounds, which I think always is a value add to any team, especially privacy teams, where having those different perspectives can lead to more creative solutions and seeing the types of risks that can apply to different employee or customer populations. So I think there's an opportunity there when you're hiring. And then, of course, when you have a team, staying connected with your team members, having regular time, ideally during their working hours, to check in, to create space so that you can have those kind of informal conversations on how is work coming, where can I be supportive, where can I help contribute to what you're working on. Creating some spaces where your team members can connect with each other. And those can be asynchronous, like on Teams or on Slack. There might be regular kind of office hours, team meeting times, or just more casual times that you have available on the calendar and people know they can kind of gather. I've seen those strategies work well with keeping a sense of connection with the team. And then, of course, there's a role to trust your team members to do the work that they're doing. Of course, you're going to have appropriate accountability to make sure they're supported and delivering on what they're delivering, but understanding that everybody has lives, and in these remote environments, there may be a distraction here or there, but as long as they're delivering, that's what matters. And then understanding their professional and developmental goals and supporting them on that. Those are all opportunities that I've seen teams and clients pursue, and that I've pursued, that have created and sustained diverse, effective, and engaged privacy teams in a hybrid or a remote environment.
And I think I completely echo if you're looking at a remote first or more remote, more hybrid, even if you're going hybrid, that opens up the candidate pool to, by at least a couple of hours travel in each direction, typically, especially if we're dealing with the States. But
Exactly.
it's but then I think the second part is that engagement, and that's the thing that I think a lot of people can sometimes miss, in particular that kind of improvement, right? The wanting to get better and improve and move forward from a career perspective. It's not just, I'm remote now, that's wonderful, I can manage my life a bit better, that's all good. It's about maintaining, well, how do you maintain the development path of those people that work for you, and making sure you get that right is critical, because that's what actually keeps people around. It's not just the remote first, it's moving them forward in their careers as well.
Precisely.
Yeah, and looking at that, the final sort of question around, what do you see in terms of emerging trends or technologies, legislation that's going forward, that's going to define maybe the next couple of years in privacy, that CPOs should be very aware of? We've touched on a couple of those things, but is there anything in particular you think will kind of define the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I want to focus on the innovation part because I think that's going to continue to be a challenge for privacy teams. I think the pace at which organizations and companies are innovating, whether it's through AI or through other developments that happen, it's just going to continue to put pressure on privacy teams to adapt and to evolve to remain relevant and effective. So this involves, as we were talking about earlier, training and upskilling, learning how those innovations and those developments are impacting the organization where you're at and impacting the types of issues you advise on, and making sure that you're taking advantage of those opportunities and not trying to ignore it or push it aside because you're too busy or you've got too much on your plate. You really need to create the space to do that. And privacy leaders need to always be thinking about how they can be investing in their teams and their talent so that they can stay relevant and competitive and supportive. On the law front, I think you're just going to continue to see laws chasing these innovations and chasing technology, whether it's, as we have talked about before, through the EU AI Act, or whether it's the state laws that are trying to chase what Europe's doing, or whether it's novel approaches that are coming out for particular sectors or particular types of businesses. The law is going to continue to chase, but it's always going to lag behind the technology and the pace of innovation. So if you center yourself around understanding how is that technology changing, how is innovation changing, how your organization operates and the products and services your organization offers, I think you're going to be a step ahead of coming up with creative solutions and strategies to scalably address the laws that are chasing these types of developments.
Legislation is important, but if you are chasing legislation, well, the legislation's already behind. That's
Exactly.
the that's the case. So yeah, no, makes a lot of sense and a very important point. Which brings us to the end. So thank you very much for your time, Sam.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. It was a delight. Appreciate chatting with you.
Excellent. Speak soon.